Okay, can we please do a mystery that doesn't have Mr. Frescura in it? I definitely feel that he's in a disproportionate amount of mysteries. He's in like 30 and Robin's in 1. What the hell? Who wants our help this time? Oh, it's Aunt Miranda yet again. Heads up! I've got a top secret case that you won't be able to resist. Does it involve researching an article for you? What is it, Aunt Miranda? Mr. Sneed, the head librarian at the British Library at the British Museum, just called. He'd just received an ancient scroll that may prove that a real King Arthur was born at Tintagel Castle. King Arthur? Wow, I always thought that he was just a story. Sometimes a legend has its footing in facts. If this turns out to be the real thing, I'll have the scoop of the year. Oh, surprise, surprise. Sneed's an old chum of your Uncle Basil, so he called me first with his news. No one else has the story yet, so be careful not to spill the beans. Let's go check it out, Carson. God, we're doing her work again! It'd make a great story. That we write. BFFs. Uncle Basil got here before us. He loves a good story. I bet he's cooking something up for one of his novels. Does it involve druids? Hello, Jennifer, Carson. Your Aunt Miranda asked me to come down here to see what stories I could dig up on King Arthur. Funny topic. Wonder what she wants with all these old tales. I like how Miranda doesn't even tell her husband what the story is. It's like, who the fuck cares about Basil? The Arthurian stories are all set in the distant past, but they're not really history. They're legends, tales that may or may not be true, handed down by storytellers and dressed up by writers in later centuries. They are lovely stories, full of magic and adventure. It would be marvelous if they were all true, but legends are almost always just terrific tales, not real historical events. Your American tales of Paul Bunyan are legends. They get King Arthur, we get Paul Bunyan. Fantastic. There may once have been a lumberjack named Paul Bunyan, but it's highly unlikely that he was 50 feet tall and had a giant blue ox named Babe lumbering about with him. The tricky part is separating the kernel of truth from the mountain of fiction. Sometimes historical heroes and heroines become so famous or popular that many exciting stories are woven about them. God, he just keeps talking. Just because some of the stories are made up, like the story of King Arthur pulling a magic sword from a stone, doesn't mean that a real person like Arthur never existed. Thanks, Uncle Basil. That was so enlightening. Humph. I'm none too sure about all this. It all sounds a bit fishy to me. Mysterious packages from unknown senders, and the whole bit about Arthur being a real king. No one's ever been sure of that. I suspect a fraud. You would. With your Sean Connery eyebrows. And your parrot for no reason. The package came with no return address, and the postmark was so smudged I couldn't make out from where it was. But if this scroll does turn out to be real, then it may prove not only that Arthur really lived, but that he was born in the castle of Tintagel. I seem to remember that no one pronounced that castle the same way twice. Like, some people said Tintagel and some people said Tintagel. I have no clue. Of course, the British mispronounce everything, like kilometer, so who cares? And laboratory. The scroll that Mr. Sneed received in the mail looks very old. It is written in fancy handwriting on a yellow roll of thick paper. Yeah, Jennifer knows what it's about. Can't fool her. The scroll says, I, wizard and friend to His Majesty Uther Pendragon, do proclaim the birth of the child Arthur in the great castle of Tintagel. Signed, find. That's what Jennifer would say. Find? What does that mean? Augustus. Signed Merlin in this year of our Lord 1032. Hey, whoever wrote this scroll can't spell very well. Wouldn't a wizard have been pretty smart? Never mind, Jennifer's not that smart. A wizard, if there ever was such a thing, would have been a very clever fellow indeed. But what we see here aren't necessarily misspellings. In 1032, English was a very different language than our modern English. A lot of these old words would look misspelled to you and I. For example, that F in the word majesty is really a fancy way of writing the letter S. It simply looks more like an F to us. English has changed a lot in 1,000 years, but I suspect that if this scroll was authentic, it would be even more difficult for us to read than this. Mr. Sneed doesn't like it. A newsletter called Nightlife lists different modern happenings that might be of interest to fans of King Arthur. It's published in Covent Garden by that fat-ass loser David Dennis. Wait, Dennis Stalls. I thought his name was David. And then in another mystery, his name is Mark. Maybe they're triplets. The front page of the newsletter carries an article on Tintagel. The article discusses whether or not the castle there could have been the true birthplace of King Arthur. It quotes Mr. Lance Ash, a shopkeeper in Tintagel, who claims, Sometimes you can just sense the presence of Merlin in the ruins. The newsletter's literary page has a review of Professor Mathan's new book, Myth, Magic, and Merlin. Excellent, raves the reviewer. Oxford's greatest authority on British mythology has produced the finest gathering of Arthurian tales since Malory. Losers. The inside page of the newsletter carries a letter to the editor from Curator Buckley of the British Museum. Yay! The letter asked the editor to help raise money to open an Arthurian exhibit in the museum. Buckley. Such a hack. The British Library has many books on the legends of King Arthur. There are many different versions of the legend, but the most popular describes a young king who grew up as a commoner, then proved himself to be the one true king of Britain by drawing a magic sword named Excalibur out of a stone. When he became king, the young Arthur, with the help of the wizard Merlin, united all of Britain under one rule. He created a wonderful palace called Camelot, where he ruled with Guinevere, his king. And then she slept around behind his back. Not that you would know anything like that, Uncle Basil. King Arthur's knights were the bravest and strongest in the land. To avoid arguments over who would sit at the head of his table, Arthur created a round table so that all his knights would have an equal place. So he could glare at Lancelot. Like, I see what you did there. Wow, there sure are a lot of stories about the adventure of King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table. You should grab one of these books when we get back to the States. They're excellent. Why can't I read them here? Maybe we should talk to Mr. Buckley, the museum's curator. His office is down here. I hope Percy Tribb is here. Yes! Look at Buckley, he's all hunched over. Mr. Buckley works with a lot of historical stuff in the museum. I bet he knows something about King Arthur.